waivers, we have discussed this in detail. The only waivers that we have committed.
31P.
Yeah. The only waivers we have committed to approving are in 17, 18, 12th graders who would want to stay at their current high schools rather than move in their senior years. And then priority would be given to, next priority would be given to 11th graders who would want to stay. And then similarly at the lower grade levels, it's priority. But it's tough to guarantee without knowing whether we're going to have actual classroom capacity. We believe we will, but we have no sense of what the demand may be. So it's hard to commit to a guaranteed waiver for those folks, other than the seniors.
And we're looking at, right now, we have a group that we call our golden ticket waivers. And those are students who started their first or second grade years so long ago, and they got a waiver that kept them within their pathway. So elementary to junior high to high school. And that is one group that we're very mindful of, and making sure that we have room for them, so that they were promised to be able to stay in that pathway. We want to ensure that. And so that's our first kind of line of sight that we need to look at. Then, as Larry said, we're looking at our soon-to-be seniors for the 2017-18 school year at Inglemoor, Bothell, and Woodinville. Because as you know, North Creek is only going to open 9, 10, and 11. And then we're going to work our way through the process. Our concern is with, I think, with some of our schools not still having capacity. So as we look at, junior high to middle school, it's still going to be a big school, and so even with 9th grade moving out, we really aren't sure, if we can guarantee all families who want waivers to be able to stay because of the capacity.
You can actually turn me on. So we have, as Carolyn mentioned, we have updated this procedure 3131P. So this is the language for the 2017-18 school year. This was updated earlier this fall. So
yeah, we're currently working on what's going to happen next year, because as soon as the board hopefully approves of the boundary adjustment, then 3131P will go into effect. And for the 2016-17 school year, we've said waivers can open as soon as you approve of this process. So we are meeting with Chris Bigelow, Dr. Bigelow, Kathy Brella, Alan Miedema, some of our analysts, and with Synergy to figure out at Mike Funes what's our capacity to make sure we have waivers out, because they're only 1 year old. They're 1 year only waivers, except for our golden ticket folks. And just we've got to make sure, we got the right students in, have we got the right capacity to be able to determine how many waivers could a school say yes to for next year, and then we got to work from there. Then.
And for next year, or for 2017-18, we'll actually be opening the waiver process on October 1 of 2016, so this fall, so that we can get as much of that information preloaded, so we can get a sense of what capacity and demand may be as early as possible.
I think, if I remember right from previous conversations on this topic, that we've also built in capacity at Inglemoor specifically for waivers in for the IB program. I don't remember.
We have capacity.
Right, that we specifically kind of
try to right-size that.
Right-size that so that students could waiver in to participate.
Our worry will be, and 17-18, I think, will be Bothell High and Woodinville, because the seniors haven't left for North Creek, and so they're going to have that extra student kind of double senior capacity. So allowing more to stay will be tough, will be a challenge, because they will be big. Woodinville will be big for that year.
And then in terms of the board retreat, we had one of the items the board reflected upon was equity. And to the extent that the waivers will open as soon as we take action on the plan. How have we thought through to make sure that those who get waivers, that's equitably applied across families that may not have transportation, that may not be as easy to reach? So some of the concerns that we had had a thoughtful conversation about, how do we make sure that those waivers are not disproportionately utilized by people that are on a certain side of the achievement gap?
Well, transportation doesn't come with a waiver. Although a parent can request transportation in the fall to, to see, do an application to see if there is room or a bus that would be kind of in the pathway to go to the school that they're waiving to, but we don't grant waivers with grandfathering transportation. That's what we call really added budget to the transportation, and with all the busing and the things that we have to do. So that's not part of the agreement for a waiver, the transportation coming. We do know that parents will look to requesting transportation, perhaps if there's room in that October time period. And they are very good about working together in a neighborhood or a group of parents to carpool. But there's a waiver application. Parents have to fill it out and say exactly what reasons are you making requesting the waiver. And we have a building principal that has 45 days to respond.
Along the lines of what Ken was talking about, we were at the board retreat yesterday, and I just want to reiterate it here, or restate it here, is that I know that there was, the families I know are that group of families, Crystal Springs, that live in the mobile home park, where transportation is more difficult for them, and some other factors. And one thing I got thinking about is, we're talking about the achievement gap, and I'm not even sure how when we, part of what Larry was saying, part of it's they feel comfortable in their home school, but I'm not sure when we uproot those families, does that actually impact our achievement gap? Because maybe being uprooted and having to move, and their parents have a harder time getting them to school on time, or all these factors could potentially, and this is just a hypothesis, could potentially be one factor that plays into our achievement gap. So I want to be mindful of that. And one thing I was thinking of is, in being mindful of that, is maybe this is where our natural leaders can come in during this transition plan, is kind of keeping tabs on that. And I think we know what our families need, but I'm not Hispanic and I don't really know what they need. And so having them being able to communicate to somebody or to the board that, here's this move, here is how it's affecting them, and that maybe with those types of groups of students and families that have, where we do see that they're struggling more within achievement in our district, that we just keep those mindful of those groups and flexible with them, that maybe, go ahead.
Oh, I don't think we want to presume that we know what the transition needs of all communities are going to be. That's why I think once the boundary plan is approved, we really want to shift the focus at that discussion to transition, and the events that we're organizing for March are really to get that kind of feedback so that we have a sense of what's important. And it will probably vary a little bit across the district as you look at, the impact of boundary adjustments. Varies from a handful of kids to no kids to 180 kids, depending on what school you may be talking about. So we definitely will be enlisting our natural leaders, our PTAs, any and all partners to help not only facilitate transition activities with us, but also to help inform us of what kinds of activities we should be looking at and how we individualize those to school communities and to different segments within individualized school communities as well.
When we did the open houses last year, do you remember, Kimberly, I think it was the Spanish the open house we had for the Spanish speakers when we were at Woodmore Elementary, we had a table for waivers, and I had a gentleman there who was helping me with the Spanish, and we had the waivers and we had the waiver information, the procedure in both Spanish and English, so that we could process and help, answer any questions. So I would imagine, as we're thinking about transitions, a waiver table is a potential as part of the whole transitioning piece.
That in the elementary, though, there won't be waivers available at those overcrowded schools, or they will be very limited.
It will be very challenging,
And so
absolutely.
that, I want to be bold to say that I'm concerned about this group of students. And we've had them show up to several conversations with the board. And so any way that we can facilitate and keep tabs on, I know this is affecting a wide range of students, but we're also talking about, underachieving group of students. And I want to be mindful.
Appreciate that, absolutely.
And I know for some of our other Hispanic families, we were able to help them, to switch them back in the original. Like at Maywood, we kept a group of families there instead of moving them over to,
Actually,
did we not?
from our perspective, we only saw the students as students. We don't know who lives in the homes, or we only know how many kids and kind of what grades they are, so we don't even know last names.
That's part of the lens I think we need to be looking through.
We
So-
did, after the fact, overlay the boundaries on demographic information, just
Yeah.
to make sure we understood what the boundary adjustments were doing. And there are some shifts in demographics between Frank Love and Crystal Springs, but nothing that moves over 3% in any given demographic category. So that doesn't minimize, or, I don't say that as if it doesn't matter to the individual families who are involved, but we did keep an eye as best we could on how the plan was impacting the overall composition of each school community.
And I know that I know the principals at Frank Love and Crystal Springs are working together to make sure that they're supporting, thinking about the transitions of the families. So I think our principals are really on top of it, thinking how we're going to support new kiddos coming in, as well as the students that we are sending to a different school. And we are aware of the waiver process and all the pieces to it, and we would try to make sure, to ensure that there's a priority, and kind of working through grade levels. I think the other grade level will be 8th graders, could be students who would be 8th graders at a particular middle school but would be moved to a different one, and they would be the ones who would have priority if we're looking at an open school to be remain at the school where they did 7th and 8th, 7th grade, so that they could actually have their 8th grade there and finish up there.
I also just want to assure the board that all of the concerns that you shared tonight has been discussed in the ETF. So that was some of the things that they discussed around transitioning, around ensuring that there's some type of process for students to stay in their home school if they want to waiver. And that's something that I think the next transition for the ETF will be, is once the board approves the draft in front of you. Then our challenge will be now looking at how do we operationalize this in a way that's meaningful for all kids.
And so I would just make a request as we go to the next phase to keep track of that waiver data and to analyze it for equity issues. And then if we see some trends in that, to reach out through the mechanisms that are possible. I had a second item on the plan, and I'm looking, I don't know which slide it is, but it's one of the ones that shows, it's about the 6th slide, and it's the one that's got the years from 2006 to 2026.
It's in the report to the board, the
In
ETF.
Yeah, the first PDF. Beautiful. And so the point is that I would ask us to think about, and I don't know if this is as we go into the budget process, or through EDTF or capital facilities, but that we consider strongly decoupling the 2018 so-called bond cycle and the Maltby property, that I believe we have sufficient funds in the capital projects fund currently to begin building that facility as an elementary school, if not completely do that. And so mentally, I would like to decouple that, and if we can get and need to get that Maltby site up earlier, so the kindergarten and first grade mitigations in the north end can be done, that we begin to have that as one of the options that's being planned. And so not making those, one of the people in the audience said that it, you know, the 2018 bond that's going to pay for the elementary school, that's a proposal. I think we should undo that in our planning process.
I don't believe this is a proposal, or there was an attempt to attach a bond with the Maltby site. This was more of a summary of our exercise going through trying to educate the board around, here's typically our bond cycles that we've done in the past, these are the sites we currently have, here's the properties we purchased, portables, etc. So it's more of an informational document than trying to tie a bond or a site together.
I appreciate that, but I've heard it said, and I think there's a language going around from a as if policy is that the 2018 is the bond cycle when we get the money to pay for an elementary school, and I don't think we should adopt that yet. I think as we go into the budget this year, we should reconsider that.
So I would just say two things. One is there hasn't been a decision or a recommendation from EDTF on what type of school would be appropriate for the Maltby site, so that's still under discussion and consideration. And I think there's, as you know, healthy discussion and perhaps some disagreement about whether there is adequate resources within the capital projects fund to fund a school without a bond, in consideration of all the potential uses of existing capital funds in the coming years.
Sure. And but just to keep it open.
Sure.
That's my request.
So as a corollary, you may not have this yet, Ryan, but I know all your effort has been coming together with this plan, but I also know as a task force, there have been discussions to start thinking about what kind of school for the Maltby site. Do you have a timeline when you might be going through that initial?
So I believe in this, I want to say we have a meeting, our next meeting is Thursday. So we've already started with that EDTF group, the education around enrollment demographics in the district. So we've brought in our consultant, our demographer, who's kind of shared the 10,000 foot level of here's what you guys should be look like over the next 5 to 10 years. The goal for us over the next few months is then to take that information and take that down to sort of the 100-foot level. What does that look like? What does that mean? What is the meaning of all of this information with birth rates and housing trends and permits, et cetera, and what are the impacts out there? So that's the next steps we have. Our goal, based on the EDTF policy, is that we would have a recommendation back from EDTF to the board sometime in April. That's sort of our goal. So we're sort of tackling two animals at the same time in the committee. One is transitioning 2017, and the next thing is what do we want to do with the next phase for us over beyond 2017.
That's helpful, thank you.
And just to throw this out there, are we looking at being able to tear down any of our current existing elementary schools and rebuilding? I know I'd heard a community member say that. I think I brought it up a year ago, and I don't remember now where. I understand we can't just build more classrooms. I get that premise, but.
So part of the capital bond task force that Karen is going to facilitate is now we're going through what is called a study and survey. So part of it is we bring in engineering expert, architectural experts, and then we do audits of all of our schools. And they're auditing a bunch of different things from a facility perspective, life cycles, does it need major systems, infrastructure, And what they're doing is we need to complete that audit first, and then we'll bring that back to both the EDTF and the Capital Projects Task Force. And then from there, we'll start looking at what's the best way, or how do we best utilize our resources, whatever resources we may have, in meeting the demand for facilities.
It's always a winnowing and a prioritization process. I want to say in the last bond cycle, the starting place was between $250 and $300 million.
It was about $650 million is what we started
Or
at.
greater than that. And then you prioritize down to, you know, what do we think is an appropriate bond amount? Our last one was $177.5 million. So as we look at 2018 bond, what's in it, you know, so you have to align the scope of your projects to how much you feel is appropriate to include in a bond measure.
And when I was saying, looking at tearing down a school, I meant to create capacity. That's what I'm saying, like an elementary school, is there a way that we, you know, one of our older elementary, or Leota, I don't know if that's, you know, but tearing them down and building up, right?
Sure.
2 stories to create more capacity, are we looking at those avenues?
I think that's part of the analysis that is going to have to happen as we look at our capacity needs, the area of growth, and then sort of the building assessment. I think those are the 3 components that are going to have to get tied together as far as what's the best options to look at trying to address the capacity. Is it a total tear down? Is it an addition? What does that look like? So I think
I know
that's,
Lake Washington, because I drove by it every single day when they went through there.
I would say if we were just looking through the filter of capacity, we would tend to be more looking at an addition to a school rather than tearing it down and rebuilding it to make it larger.
yes.
I just was thinking of what you guys said about additions, that in additions, you only have the cafeteria so big, you only have so many restrooms, so that isn't always a possibility. And then someone at one of our meetings brought up, well, have you considered tearing it down and building from the ground up? And
Sure.
cost-wise, that might not be feasible.
Correct. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. So the next item on our agenda actually is a project acceptance for December 2015, gym flooring replacement and Leota Junior High field renovation. Anyone have any questions or discussion? Leota, it is. A couple broken ankles over the years.
So this isn't putting in, this is putting, not turf.
This redid the grass field at Leo.
Did we already do this? Or
It's
this-
it's already done. The field is currently cordoned off until spring.
Okay. So we're not adding anything, we're just redoing it.
We were redoing the field because it was in poor shape.
Does that include the track?
No, not the track, just the field.
No, this was just the grass field that's within the track.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. There's like grass growing in the track.
Well, it's been fenced off while the grass establishes itself, and so it hasn't been used.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Karen. All right, the next information item is the 2016-17 budget development process timeline. So I'll just open myself. So this outlines, talking about the study session in February 9th to talk about board budget priorities and 3-year projection, incorporates with the legislative session ending March 10th. Don't know if that's optimistic or not. Anyone have any questions?
So this is a very similar, very high-level timeline to prior budget year adoption. So it just sort of shows the relationship between the legislative session and our own timelines. I would say the most significant ones there are determinations of certificated and classified staffing levels, since that, you know, our staffing obviously drives 85+% of our overall expenditures. So those are kind of key timelines there. Right now, working on enrollment projections, which drives projections of all the dollars for the coming year budgets, is the first major topic of discussion.
So I have, I think, two questions. In terms of February 9th, what process is the board or the administration doing to understand and get access to the priorities of, and I assume this is mostly probably for what we traditionally call the enhancement money, because a large part of the budget is probably not necessarily fixed in the pure economic sense, but predetermined given contracts and other things.
So I don't know if we haven't firmly determined what February 9th is going to look like from the board's perspective. I can just share you a couple of things that we're doing internally. So one, the board just adopted the 2016-17 Kindergarten Enrollment Mitigation Action Plan, which, as you know, has a general fund cost to the district of about $1.5 million. So that now is a given that we have to incorporate into our budget planning for next year. Within the various departments within the district, we are in the process of trying to itemize and attach dollars to the various transition costs that we see tied to 16-17 budget, as well as 17-18, and perhaps even beyond 17-18 budgets as we look at those costs incrementally over the coming years. So we're trying to get those itemized. And then we're doing our own internal process, as we do every year, of surfacing what other needs are out there. And we hope to have all of that information together to share with the board as a part of the 3-year budget projection update. And as I said, I don't yet know how we're going to have the board interact with all of that information and then be able to articulate your own thoughts and feedback on that. But I would just say, with 2 major contracts yet to be settled and $1.5 million kindergarten enrollment mitigation plan and transition needs and all that, I would want to temper expectations that there are lots of unencumbered resources floating around.
Thank you. And then the second question is on the capital projects fund and the processes that Ryan was just talking about. How will that be involved in this process, and is it necessary that that capital projects funding process is tied in with this, which could be called our operating budget process?
They're tied in the sense that they're the same budget cycle, but they're very different budgets that serve very different purposes. I would say that we'll be looking, as we develop next year's capital project fund budget, we'll be looking not only at what our needs may be in 16-17, but also trying to march out what our needs may be going into the future. And that could be, at least if we have a recommendation by April for a future school, we'd have some preliminary dollar amount of what we think that's going to be in the future, whether it's coming out of existing capital funds or whether it's tied to a future bond measure.
Yeah, and that, I guess as a reminder, I think one of the things that the board should be aware of is that a lot of our capital projects are already tied up into prior approval bonds, so the 2014 bond commitments that we are still working on. But I think the budget process that we'll probably be going through is looking at our construction cycles. So we'll probably be looking at our construction cycles for North Creek High School, Woodinville High School Phase 3, any of our summer projects that we have there, and then taking a look at what we believe we'll need as far as cash on a month-to-month basis.
And so that's, there's something to be planned by April-ish? Is that?
Well, April-ish would be the EDTF recommendation, hopefully, for what type of school we envision on the Maltby side in the future, which would then be a major driver of future capital expenditures.
Yes.
I missed that. And then the capital facilities plan, President Cast gave us a great spreadsheet. I'm in love with that spreadsheet. That has all these dates. When is the capital facilities plan on our annual basis? I just forget. Is that
Generally
annual?
June.
Yeah, we're required to take it to King County by a certain date, and it has to be board approved before we do that, and that typically means we have to bring it to the board for approval before the end of June.
Okay, so this, in months, we will get the capital project. Okay, thank you, that's very helpful.
That's a good add.
Hey,
Add that to my
you
spreadsheet.
got a spreadsheet I'm going to be adding.
Keep it coming. All right. So any other question about the budget development process?
How does this fit into our board retreat information where we're gonna do what we see as our high level priorities?
Well, yeah, we talked, from a budget standpoint, correct? Is that what you mean? So,
We went over that partly today, we said we had it, yeah.
well, we, in terms of, the budget prioritization versus annual board goals, kind of, they've been looked at as two different things. So in the past board, predating you and I, did a prioritization of areas to put funds that might be coming and increase budgets from Olympia. And so that is still the priorities you're working on, correct? You utilize.
And we've been utilizing those the last couple of years. I don't have the exact date of when we did that exercise, but I think our goal right now is to try and get as accurate a picture as we can heading into next year of what we think our budget situation is going to be. And there's things that we know right now, and then there are unknowns out there, and including what may happen or not happen in the legislative session. So I think our goal right now is to try and get the best information that we can to the board about what the budget outlook may be looking like for next year, and then use that as the springboard for a conversation with the board about what other priorities you may see or identify that we should be incorporating into our budget plan as we move forward.
So speaking individually, is it possible we could find that list of priorities that was established a couple years ago? I don't currently have a copy of it. That might be helpful for us to reference to see what's being used as the framework for priorities, and then as a board, perhaps we can put it in a board briefing. If we decide that we would like to talk about it and perhaps suggest it, then we could look at doing that. How does that sound? And because that's a discussion we can have as we finalize information about the actual revenue coming in.
David and Ken, we talked in September or August, whenever it was, at our board retreat, and you can help fill us in if I'm forgetting something or not stating it correctly, but about being more involved in the process of the budget and of being able to also, when we're talking about achievement gap and opportunity gap, how are we targeting this and where are the monies going? Where does the board see? That's just one bucket, and doing like a sticky dot. Sandy had said that they've done that in previous years, and so we talk about doing that exercise. And then with kindergarten and all these other major issues coming up that has not been looked.
But I think it's, it is still out there. You're absolutely right from the September retreat, and so I think it's good for us to continue to keep our eye on it, and if we need to spend time February 9th, if the priorities are something as a board that, it's always helpful to get that communication to the administration sooner rather than later. If we think as a board we need to add to, realign, it's probably helpful to get that sooner rather than later. All right, the next information item, the report for utility easement at North Creek High School. This is a standard report that we're required to get. Anyone have any questions? No? All right, we will move right along then. So next up is a policy review. So up next is the first reading of Board Policy 8110, Routes and Schedules. So this has only a couple changes. And I have a question about this, actually, which has to do with the language around the 90% efficiency rating. So my question is this, we're in 2 weeks, we're gonna be getting an update as a board about the start time task force. And I'm just wondering how this language is playing out in their work in terms of talking about the operational efficiency and how is that having any ramifications, this policy?
Huge. I think one of the things that the task force is struggling with is how to meet all of the demands at all levels and still try to maintain somewhat of a neutral cost while maximizing all of the state reimbursement and efficiency, state efficiencies.
Then, is this an opportune time to talk about that policy of a 90% efficiency rating?
In a sense of changing the number, or
Point of information, so when we're at, say, 94%, does that mean we get 94% of the cost dollar that we have? Because when we're at 100%, we get 100% reimbursed.
the answer is no. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So the way that the state reimbursement system is set up, it's based on a cohort system. And every year the cohorts change based on your efficiency rating. So currently today, there's about 8 to 10 school districts that sits in our cohort. And the number one district in our state that, and it's based on density, is the Kent School District. They're the ones that is the high water mark at this time that
In terms of
is
efficiency rating?
currently in our cohort, yes. Though we may be at 100% from an efficiency standpoint, Kent School District sort of sets the high water mark based on their density. So they're moving more kids around in less time and in less mileage. So your efficiency rating will change and your funding will change based on the cohorts that the state determines that you should fall within. And that changes on a year-to-year basis.
What is Kent doing?
Differently, they just have more kids in a denser population. In a density, yes.
So our challenge is that we're going farther.
Yeah, so Woodinville would be an good example for us. We,
Sparsely populated,
Yes.
large geographic area.
yes,
So why are we having to compete with Kent then? That doesn't seem.
fair.
Yes, thank you.
It's based on what the state is trying to compare, somewhat of an apples to apples comparison. There's no one district that looks the same based on geographic and density, but we're as close to that sort of density / size as Kent School District. So, for example, Seattle School District, they're in their own cohort by themselves because there's no one out there that looks similar to a Seattle School District. So they're 100%, they set the watermark and that's it.
That's, I think we need our own cool.
Yeah, so it's not based on, yeah, it's not based on a magic number. It's based on where the state believes you fit within this cohort of school districts. And then based on who that high watermark is, you will get a proportionate share based on your efficiency rating.
But I do think this is one of the reasons why I feel it's important that we get some face time with the board and the Start Time Task Force, because they're far enough along in their work now where I think they're, one of the elements of the board adopted resolution 714 was that the task force would operate within operational parameters and budgetary parameters that were identified and acceptable to the board. Well, the board has really not identified operational or budgetary parameters that you find acceptable. The board didn't want to do that at the time resolution 714 was adopted. So I think in the absence of that, the task force is doing the best they can to interpret that and to make what they consider to be reasoned judgments that are in the best interest of the district. But I think it's probably time now to share their thinking and their rationale with the board and to get some of your feedback and perhaps some more specific direction from the board.
Let's do it.
And so then,
Thursday.
as it relates then to
Work
this.
session.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not just study.
As it relates to this particular item then, the 90% efficiency for the policy that we're having first reading on, I'm not sure if we're getting to anything that we want to change that, or would we, depending upon the policy decision we might make on start time, if for whatever reason we chose an approach that would get us at 80%, we would probably need to change.
You would need to go back and modify your policy.
Yes.
Okay, so should this policy just move slower through our agenda process, or?
I think you always have the option of bringing a policy back.
It's pretty easy to
I
get
would-
this one.
I would offer as an example our graduation policy 2410 that manages to find its way to the board 3 times a year, so there's nothing magical about
Oh,
not
it's
bringing
coming.
policy.
It's coming.
And I think the goal of this policy that we set was 90% was sort of the benchmark we wanted to set for ourselves. Even though as a district, we've been meeting the 100% benchmark since I've been here.
I would just put out more broadly that, one of the rubs in the whole start time discussion has been costs associated with that. And from a policy perspective, on record, the board, if you look at the policy you adopted just earlier in this meeting, speaks to what has been our longtime objective on the operational side of the house, which is to minimize costs to the greatest extent possible, to maximize resources for classroom instruction. This policy, if you look at it carefully, speaks to that same dynamic of maximizing service with a minimum bus fleet. Well, there are some rubs there that I believe the Start Time Task Force is butting up against in their work to figure out how to meet all the program and operational needs that are out there and deliver on a later start time. So, but I would just say historically, these have been the policy drivers of the district that have perhaps limited to the frustration of some how we've approached adding operational costs to achieve other desired ends.
Well, I like the idea of having a study session with the task force as soon as we can. I think
We're
that-
hoping for something on January 26th.
Yeah, so this is good timing. And that would be more in line of a work session with the task force
Yes,
members?
that's correct.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Because that's the question I've been asking through, at points through this process, is getting these periodic updates. And
I think
yeah, we did just get one in our briefing, but, being able to get, even just having it presented to us and, periodically so we can see where the process is at when we have task force.
And I think we're at a place now where we're at an appropriate juncture for that to happen. We'll be launching a community survey on Friday around considerations to help guide further processing of the task force work. But I think it's the right timing. We'll likely be meeting more specifically with the subcommittee that have been doing or representatives of the subcommittee that have been doing more of the detailed work around the various options the task force has been processing rather than the entire task force.
And I have a question. We kind of talked about this before about trying to partner. Potentially, there could be an opportunity to partner with community transit or Metro, where in some of the school districts, my understanding is they'll make runs. They'll help to create runs that don't exist for school districts.
Yeah, I
like
think
Bellevue and
I think the goal for us is once we can identify what the start times will look like, then we can start looking into the implementation of the start times or operationalizing the start times. And until we know that information, we're just guessing with the various outside partners.
but is that an opportunity?
Always an opportunity.
And then that is what other school districts, correct? Am I correct in saying that is like what Bellevue does?
Seattle and Bellevue in particular. Our challenge in the past has been we don't have the public transit density
Or system.
in our, or infrastructure. We don't have enough saturation of bus services from Metro within our community to have them realistically be a solution for us. Or we haven't historically.
And we would utilize two systems, two
Yes.
different systems.
Yes.
Correct, I know, we have
Yes.
community and.
Yeah, community transit.
They're, okay.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Great info. All right, next up is board reports and communications, future agenda items. Anyone have any future agenda items?
We just defined a couple.
Start.
I know, right? I do
Password.
have, late start for the 26th. Past board budget priorities, which will come to a board briefing senior year, and then we'll see if we need to let Larry know, perhaps, if you'd like to discuss it. Anything else that I didn't capture?
Does it make sense, the accountability finance work group idea, would that make sense to talk about that at the same time on the February 9th that we're talking about the budget? Or could,
Sure,
was
you know-
that already added to the agenda in
It's not,
2 weeks?
it's not formally added. What I was gonna request, actually, I think it'd be helpful to have as a discussion item, just some of your background, since you have more of a education, for lack of a better word, in finance, to kind of explain your thinking and the background of it, and then we could just start the discussion. And that would be something
Yeah,
I'm open
I
to
could-
having on the 26th agenda,
26th of January.
of January.
Yeah, absolutely, that would be,
No, it'll be a discussion to talk about Ken's ideas
Oh,
about looking into, about Ken's ideas about
and we
looking
could
into
limit that
other.
to 6.5 minutes. Like Bellevue University.
Yes.
Oh,
That's
you,
right,
oh,
6.5
don't tell me,
minutes.
I could get us an.
My
agenda-
presentation,
yeah.
I'll do 6.5.
6.5 minutes, okay,
6.5
and then as a board, it'll get our wheels churning, and then we'll
Right.
go from there, how's that
Okay.
sound?
Give me something you need.
Bellevue has
Bellevue's
timeframe
board
of how
meeting
long
agenda
they're allowed to talk.
Is down to the minute, and if once, 8:15 comes or whatever, you move on,
They do.
would be,
Just saying.
all right, any other future agenda items?
There's so many that I think we have a lot right now.
I think we do. I think we do. All right, then we can move over to member reports then. It gets kicked off with David.
So on Thursday, the 10th of December, attended the North Shore Schools Foundation meeting, and some updates from that meeting. They ran an end-of-the-year donation campaign. They also sponsored the Hour of Code on December 11th. That was widely received. They also have the milk money donations out at restaurants and businesses throughout our community. That money goes to support North Shore students facing housing vulnerabilities, so when you see those, please be generous in the community. They're also holding their annual All In for Kids luncheon at the Linwood Convention Center on April 6th. So please plan on attending if you can. Also enjoyed the administration lunch on the 15th of December. And we also, as a group, were at the Conversations with the Board, the 5th of January. And then on last Friday, I saw Director Smith at our PTSA Council Reflections, which was a really well-attended and well-set-up event, and I really enjoyed seeing the artwork of all of the talented students in our district, so that was great. Thank you.
All right, so next up is Sandy.
Okay, so I won't repeat what's already been said, but I did attend the Hour of Code at Maywood Hills Elementary along with Kelly Marquardt, who is a staffer with Congresswoman Delpenny's office. So we got to watch 3 different grade levels do their Hour of Code. And we, like 1,000 times multiplied how many hours of coding were going on in the district that week than had been in previous years. So I'm exaggerating 1,000 hours, but it was a big multiplier of how many more, and just great work doing on V-Bots are very cool. I did not get one for Christmas, but I did ask. That's what the kindergartners used to practice sequencing. So they would program this little bug thing to move, and it was adorable. But great work going on, and it was really fun to show that to Congresswoman DeBenny's office. She would have been there, but she was trying to keep the budget going. And then as Superintendent Francois said, we've wrapped up all of our fall meetings with our 9 state legislators before they head into sessions. We had the final meeting with Roger Goodman, again, a great conversation. And we'll see what happens next. Big question mark there. Attended some holiday concerts and assemblies, got to see the fabulous John Stern in his elf costume at Inglemoor High School. And then thanks to PTA for the Great Reflections presentation. That was well done, lovely. And then I'm telling you, last night, the presentation by the Lake Washington PTA was fantastic. It was, I don't think Heather Miller's fingers stopped moving the whole time. She was taking notes, trying to, drawing from the firehouse, getting all that. They went through great reconfiguration and boundary changes just a few years ago, and so the PTA came and spoke about what they learned and recommendations, and as Sherry said earlier, being positive was just huge, and they said you'll come through it, and it takes about a month, and then you're moving forward. So it was just really fantastic, and I really wish somehow we could replicate it and get it out, because lots of good ideas. And then my only question is, I just want to kind of do a roll call, if you will, of who all is going to Olympia at the end of this month. Just want to make sure.
For
The Day on the Hill.
Yeah.
So January 31st, February 1st. So you're going, Larry's going. So we do have 3 board members down there. So Cindy, there are 3 of us that are planning to be in Olympia. I don't know how many of us have RSVP'd you, but
Yeah, probably not. And seeing, it might be too late to get a hotel at the Red Lion, Cindy, but that's probably the preferable place to stay. And I know it was sold out pretty fast last year. Yeah. Oh, there wasn't the Red Lion available. Oh. Anyway, we can talk about it offline, but.
all right, that's what I needed to know.
Thanks, Sandy. Ken?
So I did the holiday lunch in December, reflections on Friday, conversation with the board on Tuesday, and then met with several members in the community around the finance proposal, budget proposal that I'm talking with. And then I am scheduled to go to the Coalition for Community Schools conference in April 6th, 7th, and 8th. We'll be doing a site visit, several site visits. This is out Albuquerque, New Mexico. One of the site visits will be dinner. So they have like a homework dinner, so they use the school cafeteria. And so interested in, this is kind of the notion of providing a one-stop shop for health and human services through the school. Homework help, keep the library open, and so I'm interested to see how they're doing that in several of their schools. And then in the board briefing, there was an invitation to visit Kenmore Junior High and their Hang Time program and our community schools effort. And so if you're interested in that, please contact Cindy, and then I'll just do that on my own. If no one else wants to join that, if other people want to join that, we can mutually calendar that. And then if someone else from the district, district staff, might be interested in going to that conference, I would love to have that as well as a board member going to that conference in April.
And when about were you thinking of visiting the Hang Time?
So it's visiting in Hang Times. So I had seen the conference and had asked questions about it. It was directed to, I think, Jewel, and then she had said, come over and have a site visit. And so I said, well, let's make sure, if any other board members want to attend that, to see it, so they don't have to visit or entertain us more than once. So since the conference is in April, that could be any time in February or, so not press on that, but if you're interested.
So February. Okay.
Yeah, just do that.
Thank you. So the only thing I have to add, I took the opportunity to judge for DECA in Bellevue. Oh my gosh, did I skip you? Kimberly, can you please give us your board?
I just wanted to know, do we have how many other conversations with the board? So we went to conversations with the board, and that is one of my favorite things.
We have 2 more.
And are we doing a Hispanic?
Yes, we are in
Okay.
April.
Okay, so amazing. It's great to get feedback. If we can like figure out ways to get the word out. I know people, I hear that people are like, oh, you guys did that. So I'm not sure. I know we're trying every way we can to get the word out, but I don't know if at the school level, if principals could put that in their newsletter or something, because I know a lot of people still aren't hearing about it. I know we did the robocall, so I understand we're doing all these different methods, but we still, yeah, I know.
It was nice too, I noticed the PTSA, Council of PTSA, you put it on your Facebook page, so that was helpful too.
Oh, thank you. And it was nice to see, you know, you guys there and other representatives. I appreciated that.
So anyway, so I volunteered to judge for DECA, which had a great representation from all 3 of our high schools, and it was great too. I've heard about the program for years, and it worked with my schedule, and it only took a morning, which wasn't too bad, so if anyone ever has the opportunity to do it, I highly recommend it. Love the experiential learning. So that's all I had to add. So, nothing else, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. And so we have a study session after this, maybe we'll take a couple minutes.